This is Get Savvy, the podcast for people who want to claim back their time through the power of delegation, productivity, and automation. Welcome to episode number 55. Today I have Briar with me, who's our tech lead at Strictly Savvy, and probably the person on the team who has built the most automations out of all of us.
Hello.
It's very nice to have you here. She's our expert. So Briar's going to share some of her expert knowledge with you today, because we have been talking a lot about automation on the podcast, what you should automate, where to start, what tools to use. But today we want to take that one step further, because not all automations are created equal. Some will save you hours every week and will be running seamlessly in the background and actually improve things for you and for your business. But others will break, or they'll create more problems or end up being more effort than they're actually worth. So we're going to talk today about, we're going to interview Briar today about what actually makes a good automation, what Briar's looking for when she builds automations, and what separates the good ones from the bad ones. So, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready as can be, I suppose.
So, what would separate a good automation from a bad one?
Yeah, well, so the bad one I would say is causing too many issues for the team or for yourself.
So like the automation's not doing the full job that it should, and then you're having to step in too much, or
whether it's erroring, like sending you a notification that it's, failed, or you've created yourself manual steps in order for an automation to work. If you're doing more work than what you were originally doing just so that it's automated, then that's a very bad one. Yeah. And so, the good one is simple, easy, saving you lots of time, and that's what makes it good.
So, bad ones creating you more time than you were spending in the first place. I think that's a very good way to check. What if you are, for the most part, doing less, but you are still having to, say, step in and do things that maybe you weren't originally doing, but it's like not as much as doing the full, complete original task?
Yeah. I would say if you're still stepping in, doing parts of the task, if it's maybe a task that you absolutely hate or you loathe every single day, and, mentally taking up too much time, I would say go for it still, even though if you're doing some manual steps. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. If overall still saving time, or, if you're still enjoying it like that, then I would say it's worth doing.
Yeah. There are some automations that we've built for Strictly Savvy that we still have to do manual parts, or like it does the first part of a task and then we do the rest of it, which is still better than us doing the whole thing.
Yeah. And, sometimes that comes down to whether that's limitations from apps and programs, or perhaps, but it can evolve. All this technology is, growing every day. So it may be like that initially, but down the track, you may be able to automate the whole process. Yeah, some automations will just need to be set up like that, but due to various reasons, perhaps maybe you have too many variables coming through for the task, and so then that would cause you to manually do some parts of the automation until it's settled.
Yeah. Well, we've talked previous episodes about if there is something that kind of requires some decision making, sometimes you might be able to automate that, because you can have the AI module plugins and stuff that can make some probably more simple decisions.
Yeah.
But then if there's more logic and like you need to apply different thinking to go down a different path or something, that's not like when this happens, do this, when this happens, do this. It's like you actually need to...
Yeah, some higher level decisions.
Then that is the stuff that's going to probably evolve that you can maybe do later.
Yeah, manually. And you can even like look at automating those kinds of decision parts of the process by linking in, perhaps creating a task for yourself or, a calendar event, and they can ask you, do you want it to do this or that, and then you can make that decision there. But obviously more complex situations are different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it will change per task and per automation, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the one.
So would you say that there is one thing that people do that would be the biggest mistake when building automations?
Yeah, I feel like there can be quite a few different mistakes people could look at. One of them would be to overcomplicate things. So perhaps they have this, a lot of the time people have, a task. It could be a series of tasks that they really dislike doing, takes up a lot of time, but it's not quite streamlined into when I say that, I mean when this happens, then this happens and that happens, and then if that happens, so they don't have a full process. It's kind of up in the air.
Winging it?
Yeah, winging it, or it's just not very clear. One of the biggest mistakes, they have the big idea to automate that whole thing when it's not clear yet. And then that can just cause like too many variables, mistakes, bad things happen. So overcomplicating it and on bigger things when they should really just break it down into smaller chunks.
Yeah. And we've had some instances, because we're currently going through and we're trying to automate as much as we can for our clients. We've had some instances where the team have come to you when they're trying to do something, but you've actually recommended that they don't do what they're trying to do because it is going to add too many risks to it as well if it doesn't work. Like even as simple as what you'd think sometimes as simple as having an email that drafts to all the people on a calendar invite, but then you've got 6 different people in the calendar invite and you want the email to say, hi, X and Y and Z and A and B and C, when in reality, if you're sending an email like that, you're probably just going to be like, hey, everyone, or something like that. And so Briar has advised the team that instead of naming every single person after a certain point, just make it simple, strip it back, make it, hey, everyone, hey, all, or something like that.
Yeah. And you really need to think of all the different variables that could happen. Like, okay, maybe you don't have 6 people in a calendar invite every time, but you need to think about all the ifs and buts of situations, because that's when the errors can happen, mistakes can happen, and you really don't want the automation to be harder. It should be easy for you, working well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even what you said before, like there needs to be a process and you kind of want the process almost to work as like a flow chart.
Yes.
So like, you know the logic. If yes, then go this way. If no, go this way, because that's actually how your automation's going to look as well when you're building it, and it follows paths. So if you're trying to build that out of no process, you either need to figure out the process as you're going along and be able to figure out all of those variables and risks as you're going. But it's even better if you can do it off of a process.
Yeah. If you already have that written up, that's just, makes it so much easier, because then you've already thought about every single thing that could happen. Yeah,
exactly. Is there such a thing as an automation that is too complex?
I would say yes. And I think this is what trips people up a lot of the time. I think kind of like what we were talking about before, they're looking at too big of a picture sometimes. They don't have a clear process, and so that complicates things. They also may try to involve too many apps, and I think in programs where I think a lot of the time people jump too quickly into automations, when a lot of the apps and programs these days, they can actually natively do a lot of the stuff within the app. I think before you introduce other apps, especially cost-wise, you should look at what you can do in-house. Even sometimes that could look at reducing some of the programs that you're trying to incorporate into your automation. Maybe it's just using 2 different programs, or, it also saves you money if you can. Skip out of one. But that's definitely one of the ways that I think it overcomplicates, people get tripped up on. Also, I think kind of like what we were saying before about there could be too many steps, which can cause too many potential problems, which then just is not working for you. Then you want it to be working with you.
You got to definitely, consider the risks. And I suppose as well, if you have a really big, long automation, because if you have lots of steps in a process, you could technically have an automation that does all of those steps and it's a big, long automation. But then you're also risking, if there's an error at an early part in that automation where it stops the flow and then it doesn't complete the rest of the steps.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really, in those cases, you do need some backups in your automations in terms of like, if that was to error, what do you want it to do? People need to think about that, whether you want it to be notified via email or perhaps you send it down a different path to do something else. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind for sure.
Okay, so to make an automation reliable, you need to have a process and you need to have answers to those what ifs in the process so that you know where the automation is going to go. But how do you ensure that an automation doesn't break?
So I do a few different steps when creating automations. And so in the workflow, if I were to have any paths, where it separates into this may happen, that may happen, I always like to add in an extra path for something that may never ever happen, or if it gets confused, then I want it to go down a certain path. And I usually lead that path towards either maybe it creates a task for me, if it's for an automation for myself, so it, can direct it to myself to make sure I go and look at it that day, or perhaps I get it to, if it's to do with a spreadsheet, it might get entered into a different spreadsheet, something like that. Otherwise, another thing that I like to do to make sure automations don't break, if I'm asking the automation to do a lot of thinking, and when I say that, I mean by like pulling a lot of data, I do like to add in some time steps. I think that's what it's called, where you just like add in a delay of, whatever, it could be a minute, just so that it allows things to catch up and the data to process through, and not cause the next step to then break the whole flow of your automation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once you start creating automations, and then if you notice that it's failing all the time due to the same thing, then you really do pick up on what's going wrong there. And it's usually another variable that you didn't think of. Yeah.
So other than the timing thing, because that is a very real thing, if you're like pushing through too much data, it can just, stop. Other than that, are there any other common reasons why an automation might fail?
Oh, yeah. So another common reason would be when you have your programs and apps that you have connected to your automation platform. All programs and apps upgrade. They constantly have to keep up with their technology, up with the times. And so this can cause errors with your automations, because then your automation platform doesn't know that it's upgraded and it's trying to do what you've set it to do, but it's not there anymore. So you either have to reconnect it or perhaps even change parts of your automation because they just ain't talking to each other anymore. They're having a bad time. So, like a really good example, if you perhaps are using a free account of your certain platform, or maybe like your subscription level is more of on the lower end, those are more frequently upgraded or change a lot. So that's quite common to cause errors in your automation platform, whether you most likely need to reconnect them more frequently.
It's like the connection expires quickly for the freer accounts.
Yeah. I don't know why that is though. But yeah.
Just a thing that they don't want you to...
Yeah, they want you to pay more money.
Yeah. So what, firstly, is error handling with an automation, and how do you even know if there are errors?
So a lot of the automation platforms have their own way of doing the error handling situation. Most commonly, they will email you to your account that you've used to set up the automation platform and give you a notification to say something's wrong. And that's when you would go and jump in and then look at the history, look what's failed. You can then dive in deeper and see what data's missing and why it didn't work.
How, you build a lot of automations for us. So how do you balance the speed of building automations, especially when you want to build a lot at once, and actually make sure that you're building them well?
Yeah, this one's tricky. So I would say if you found out you want to tackle the automations that will probably save you the most time. But then on the other hand, you're like, well, this other automation is only 2 steps, so it's only going to take me 5 minutes to create and build and get out. So I would say if you're duplicating a lot of automations, make it a template, and then you can even use that template to build similar automations, say that will also work for your business. Then you're only building it once and you're building it good, and you don't need to worry about the next time that you do it and how you did it and how you made it work well. Again, it's just you're working smarter and not harder. Yeah.
What about simplifying automations as well? Because you kind of talked about that earlier, and again, going back to the like what ifs in the process and stuff, and like taking out some of those variables. So do you think it's worth people looking at any automations that they've already built and seeing if there are actually steps that they could take out or simplify
out of the automation?
Yeah.
I personally think so. I feel like sometimes, you can overcomplicate it. That's what you mean now.
Yeah.
And then so a lot of the steps may not be necessary, and you can just make it a whole lot simpler for everyone involved. And again, it will just reduce the risk of errors as well by reducing the steps.
Something else that I want to flag here, which I think does relate to building an automation properly, is especially if you're using a platform where you're having to pay to set up the automation. So it might be that, like Briar said, you're using something that natively has some kind of automation builder in it, but you've had to upgrade to use it, or you've got something like Zapier or Make that is an actual automation platform that you're paying for. The other thing that you want to consider is the token usage per automation. So we've talked briefly about this before, and it's the same with AI. Like every time you're performing actions in these platforms, you're using tokens, and that is part of your plan. So the plan we're on, we get 10,000 tokens at the moment. If you're testing an automation, often that will use some of those tokens. And so every time you hit test to run the automation and see if it's working, that's going to use some of your tokens, which is fine. Something to bear in mind though, as you're doing that, if you're just hitting tests like crazy. But every time that your live automation runs as well, that is also using tokens. With your automations, you're going to have triggers. So that might be when X happens, then your automation goes off, or it might be a time-based thing. Try again and probably strip that back as much as you can, because we've found automations before that have been running almost like 24/7, and they didn't need to be. And so they were just using tokens all the time, running through the night on the weekends when they actually didn't need to. They just needed to be running like every couple of hours through the week. So things like that, those things are good to keep an eye on, because I guess that's just bad practice really, isn't it?
Yeah. Super good to consider that. Really, when you make automations live and scheduling them, you want to consider when they're triggering to make sure you're getting the most out of your plan as well. Also considering you don't want to miss anything as well. So it is based on each automation, but definitely really good to consider.
Right balance. But as well, if you're, I guess you could think about it, if you're paying more for the automation money-wise than you would be, say, hourly for you to actually, or someone in your team to do that task, then it's potentially not a good use of an automation. Most of the time that's not going to be true unless you do have it running constantly like that, and then it might just be worth considering if that actually needs to be running the way it is.
Yeah.
So other than the processes side of things, having that figured out ideally before you start building an automation, would you say there's anything else that people should be thinking about before they just even start considering it?
So the process thing would be the first one. The apps and the programs that you're wanting to use in the automation, I really think that people should be checking what you can do within those programs. Scaling back all the different steps of what you can, just making sure it's necessary. And then looking at, is it worth the time? Make sure it's actually going to save you time.
Yeah. Do you think people need to know the process themselves to be able to set up an automation? Like, say it's documented, but I don't actually perform that task, and so I don't necessarily know all the ins and outs. Do you think then I could set up that automation?
Oh, yeah, if you have the documentation of all, and you know that it's, up to date and has all the details in it, I don't think you necessarily need to have performed that task before. You could go off the documentation, but I think the person that normally does it, what you're replacing, would be the best one to check if it's testing correctly. Yeah.
Okay. If I had 50 automations that I've managed to now set up, they're all running, should I just forget about them and let them do their thing?
Yes and no, because if we've made a good automation, which is what we have been talking about this whole time, we would have added in steps to make sure if anything does fail, you're notified how you wish to be notified. And we usually, when we build automations that may involve, going out to your customers or clients, something that's a bit more, I would say, scary for new automation users, we would have added in like a foolproof way of, it's not going to do anything that you don't want it to do. So perhaps you may be sending an email straight to a customer. So we could make it so it drafts the email instead of automatically sending them straight away. And that just gives you a bit of time to check it, and a bit gives you peace of mind, because you can check that the automation's working correctly for, say, a month before you actually make it live to send. But yeah, so if you've built the automation correctly, you'll be notified when it fails, and they'll just be working away for you in the background.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Briar. I think the biggest takeaway from this is that automation isn't just about saving time. It's about actually building something that works, something that can run in the background, something that is actually saving you time and or money, not just adding more steps to a process.
Yeah, we want it to work for you, not against you. It should be working well with you, like another little team member.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you're thinking about getting started with automation, don't just focus on like trying to automate absolutely everything. Actually do put some thought into it, and the stuff that you have the processes for already is going to be the perfect place to start. And if you're not sure where to start at all, then we can help you out. Feel free to book a call with us over at strictlysavvy.co.nz, and we can have a look at all of your processes and or help you come up with some if that's what you need. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Get Savvy podcast.
Woo!